Hi, everyone. I somehow missed my yesterday talk, but today is Saturday, the 14th of December, and I'm going to address another email that I received from somebody this week. Since the 1970s, when Birthing Better mothers and fathers and I developed these skills, it was often in response to either what we had concerns about happening or what happened at our births. In the 1970s, 95% of us were laboring, so few of us were having a cesarean, and we were unconscious for that major abdominal surgery. So we had a lot of opportunities to talk about what happened. And at that point, it was sort of coming to the end of this childbirth skills based approach, which was Lamaze, taught in most hospitals, and Bradley method, which was husband coach childbirth. So back then, we were using some skills. The skills weren't very adjustable, weren't very adaptable, and weren't very sustainable. And fathers wanted better skills, broader skills, and women wanted more adjustable and understandable skills that would sustain them um, throughout their labor. So we asked a lot of questions, and the questions were often, what should I do? And after the birth is, what could I have done? Because we lacked choices back then. We didn't make birth plans, and we had the normal assessments, monitoring procedures of that day. And most of us couldn't get up and walk, we couldn't eat, we couldn't do all of those things. And as the Birthing Better skills grew in the 1980s, when the cesarean rate tripled, we had choices, but we lacked skills because the natural birth movement was saying birth is instinctive, fathers shouldn't coach, and women should just be left alone to discover birth by themselves. So we've always developed skills around our responses to what happened at our birth. And this was the question that I received this week. It was, and this is so common. You really want to say, well, how did we get here if this is so common? Which was a woman who wanted a natural birth, and she had been told since the 1980s that birth was instinctive, she'd know what to do. And she was also told to change positions frequently and to walk, get into gravity positions, because when we delivered in the 70s on our back with feet in stirrups, that wasn't a gravity plus position. However, I want to tell you, I'm a body worker, so I come out of body awareness, whereas most midwives don't, most obstetricians don't. They have anatomy and physiology. And the other thing that happens is that we as women, sadly, aren't incredibly aware of our body. And 99.90% of us have not been taught that we should be aware of how our baby is talking to us in each contraction. And so I want to address some of those points today. So this woman was saying that she squatted and she walked and she got into hands and knees and she changed positions frequently from her natural birth and ended up with a cesarean. And she was absolutely freaked. So where do we even start with this? Because women are told that you should get into any position you want to get into. And what we learned as Birthing Better families, no, you only want to get into the positions your baby likes. But then the question is, how do we know what our baby likes? And we didn't come onto this instantaneously. We came onto this through trial and error and realizing that there was this conversation between the baby and the mother. In fact, I had someone else who ended up with a cesarean who told me that their midwife had said to them, the reason you didn't dilate was that your women's bodies know when not to dilate because her baby had a cord wrapped around its neck. And the reality is no, women's bodies do not know. They don't know. If we are living in our body, that's our body. And if our body knew not to dilate, our body, our mind would be saying, okay, I want to have another contraction in 30 seconds. I want it to last 30 seconds long. I want it to be on a scale of 4 to 5, on a scale of 10 being really painful. And be able to control birth. We cannot control birth. Women cannot control birth. So then the question is, who's controlling the birth? And it turns out what we learned is our baby is. And we have to learn to listen to our baby when we're laboring. So these are the things that we learned about this idea of change positions. And this, as I said before, all started with don't lie on your back with feet up in stirrups because you're not in a gravity position. That's true. But if you get into that position now, your pelvis is wide open. So in fact, your pelvis is open. Remember that. So now get into that first preferred position of natural birth advocates was what was called the semi-recumbent position, which was we sat up on our sacrum, often had our feet bent like that, and we pushed. And we pushed and we pushed and we pushed and we pushed and we blew our vessels in our eyes. And why? Because the baby needs to move our sacrum back and out in order to turn under our pubic bone. And even though lying on our back with feet in stirrups wasn't a gravity position, we were open for our baby. And as soon as we got into that preferred gravity position, we closed our sacrum. And when we closed our sacrum, it was harder for our baby to come through the pelvis because the pelvis dimensions were smaller. So this led all of us, Birthing Better mothers and fathers and I that developed the Birthing Better skills to start to pay attention to positions. So when this person wrote to me, they said, I walked, I squatted, and I got on hands and knees. So let's first talk about the walking. Very gravity position, absolutely gravity position. However, if you're sitting down watching me now, think about the bones you're sitting on. Think about the muscles in your butt. And what are they doing? They're quite relaxed, right? Because you're sitting. Now stand up. What happens to the muscles in your butt when you stand up? Well, they tense because we are not amoebas. And so our body has to hold itself up through muscle and soft tissue fascia attention. So when we stand up and our butt tightens, then that closes the space for our baby to some degree in some women. So I want you to go sit back down again. I want you to think of those sit bones, okay, because that's the side-to-side dimension of our pelvis. I want you to make them a little bit more further apart because that is helpful to your baby. Your baby has to pass through them. So open up as wide as you can between those sit bones. Great. And then think about those muscles in your butt and your leg. Great. You know what they are. You're sitting up, right? So now I want you to stand up and feel what those sit bones do. And for most of us, they come closer together again, which means that walking is not bad in labor. It can be bad for some babies, depending on how those babies are responding to our body. And this is why in Birthing Better, one of the skills we have is map your pelvis. You can't map the inlet that's above your pubic bone. You can't reach even into that to the back of your sacrum, but you can feel where your baby's head is. You can't map the inside, the narrowest part of your pelvis, unless you go into your vagina and feel for it. And you will when you learn to do the internal work. But you can map the outlet. And the outlet is important because it can help you understand what your baby is moving through. So if your sit bones, if you can put a fist through your sit bones, that is what's called average distance. Now, if you go from your pubic arch to your tailbone, pubic arch to tailbone, if you can put your fist through that, that is a average dimension. So women who have a fist between their sit bone, a fist between their pubic bone and your tailbone, that is an average pelvis. Now, your baby can be big or average size or small, and it's not the weight of the baby, it's the shape of the baby's head. There are some women who are wider between their sit bone, narrower front to back, And you have to pay attention to positions that open up those dimensions. The same way you can be wide front to back, narrow side to side. So you need to know that about your body so the positions you get into can help your baby. So let's go into the squat. So women are often told squat when you give birth during the second stage, or squat because it opens your pelvis. Well, that's not actually necessarily accurate for many women. Depends on how you squat. Now, women in countries that do squat, and not all women squat in all traditional communities, but it's very common in the Southeast Asian communities. If you notice, their knees are to the front of their body. When Western people squat, they tend to put their knees out like this. And you can get into a squat. Now, put your knees out to the side and feel what happens to the muscles that run from your sit bone to your sacrum. They contract, which means they prevent the sacrum from being mobile, which goes back to sitting on the sacrum in the semi-recumbent position. Your baby needs your sacrum to be mobile because in order to move and present itself to your vaginal opening, which is at the front of this space, it has to push back on your sacrum, come down, and then curve under your pubic bone. And when those muscles between your sacrum and sit bone are contracted, once again, you're fixing your sacrum and your baby can't push the sacrum out and back. So if you move your knees more to the midline, you will feel those muscles from your sit bone to your sacrum expanding. Now you can tuck your tail under and push your tailbone back. That's what your baby is trying to do as it moves down and around. So squatting is fine as long as you don't contract those muscles from your sit bone to your sacrum with your knees out to the side. Now, if you want to get into a squat, you can modify it by putting one knee down. And when you have a position that is asymmetrical, it is harder for you to store tension in your body. So the third position that this woman talked about was hands and knees. This became very common in the late 1970s. In 1970, when I gave birth, you couldn't get off the bed and you really couldn't move around too much. But once the natural birth movement got stronger, which was right for them to do that, they were asking a lot of questions saying women should have more choices. And those choices had to do with simple things, being able to get out of bed, eat, drink, have partners with you, having more people with you, being able to have a home birth, being able to have a midwife. All those choices were important. However, squatting became very popular. Hands and knees became very popular. That became popular in the 1980s. We knew, our BirthingBetter families and I, and it wasn't the same people over and over, new people all the time, that hands and knees was not a great position for women to get into, but it is being used over and over and over and over again. The first stories that we heard were actually from advocates of hands and knees who were saying that they had a lot of fourth-degree tears. In other words, women who tore from their vaginal opening all the way through their rectum. This is not what you want. You don't want to tear. If you do tear a little bit, you'd like a first-degree tear. The next, you'd like a second-degree tear. Third-degree tear is to the rectal muscle. Fourth-degree tear is through that muscle. You do not want that. So we knew from people who were advocating hands and knees in the 70s, that in the 80s, that women were experiencing a lot of fourth-degree tears. That will tell us something. So BirthingBetter families started to take a look at what was happening in hands and knees positions. So the thumbnail on this video shows me many, many years ago, I think 35 years ago, when we first made the pink kit, which was the body skills, with a woman there and what happens to your baby. So one of the things that's important is for your baby to reduce how broad, if it's coming down head first, its head is. It's called flexion, chin to the chest. Okay? That chin to the chest puts the narrowest diameter of the baby's head into your pelvis, through your pelvis, through your birth canal, through the outlet of your vagina. That is the preference. When you get into a hands and knees position, you are basically lying on your stomach. You are only upright in your thighs and your arms. And when you're on your stomach and your stomach is falling down to the floor, the baby's head, if it's in the pelvis, will stay there, but its body will fall down. And when it falls down, it causes the baby to deflex its head, which is the broadest dimension of the baby. So hands and knees, in terms of the best position your baby can be in, really is not a great position. Babies will come out in a lot of not great positions. But the other thing that happens in the hands and knees, and this is the reflection of what happens when we no longer have a skilled birthing population, is that the contractions back off. Because it is our baby telling us that this position is fine for them. And it's not just the position, it's their position in the position that our body is in, the position or posture of our body. When we have a progressive labor, the contractions get longer, stronger, and closer together. When we lack skills, women don't cope well with more intense labors, and they want to do something. Often they'll take an epidural or take other painkillers. But women, particularly who have natural birth, will tend to get into a hands and knees position. In fact, in New Zealand, where I live, that was the recommendation by the College of Midwives, who control all of maternity care, is a pain relief tactic was for women to get into a hands and knees position because it backs off the contraction, backs off the intensity. The contractions get more spaced out, and it gives women a sense of relief from the pain and the progressive labor. But it causes the labor to go on for hours. So what we want is a skilled birthing population of women who cope well with labor contractions that are getting longer, stronger, and closer together. So the hands and knees is not great for a lot of babies. It deflexes their head and it backs off the labor. Now, the fourth idea was I should change positions frequently. Now, what we learned was that's not accurate either. So we've just moved through walking, squatting, hands and knees, change positions frequently. And we're telling you, or I'm telling you, that what we learned is most of that has to be dependent on the woman and her ability to use skills to prevent things in that position from causing the baby to back off its labor, because the baby is telling us, what you're doing, mom, isn't working for me. And we needed to work with our baby's efforts to open us up and come down through and out our body. So when the idea was change positions frequently, often what we would see was women or the stories we would hear would be women whose labors were progressing, their contractions getting longer, stronger, and closer together. And then they decided, because they were told change positions frequently, to do something else. And the labor would change. Now, what we learned as Birthing Better families is that when we change a position, it takes our baby about 3 contractions to adjust to the internal changes that means to them. And what we discovered was if we were in a position that was working for our baby and our contractions were getting longer, stronger, and closer together, do not change positions. Your baby's telling you that the position you're in is good for the baby. And this can be as simple as leaning forward. That's a posture more than a position. So there are women whose babies do not like when they lean the top part of their body forward. The contractions go off. Now, it's very hard to convince a woman to stay in positions when her labor contractions are getting more painful because they're getting more progressive. And what we know after all of these years was that we need to come back to growing a self-learning skilled birthing population. Thankfully, now there are a number of skills-based methods out there that you can choose from. It's really important you learn your skills around 24 weeks when your mind is really clear. About 36 weeks, you're into baby mode. You don't want to really learn skills, and you can give birth quite soon, somewhere around that period of time. 24 weeks is great. Start to prepare your body for birth. Your birth hormones are just beginning to be active. You want to create space in your pelvis, create mobility in your pelvis and in your sacrum. And you want to learn about 32 weeks how to do deep vaginal massage to prepare the inside of your birth canal for your baby. The 3 inches of the birth canal is just soft tissue. It's not bony structure like the pelvis is. But it has tension in the soft tissue and the muscles in there. And when you start to work inside, it can be uncomfortable for the first week or so. But then the birth hormones really kick in and you can open up that birth canal. And when you open it up during second stage, the baby opens you up like a flower rather than the stretching in which you push for a long period of time. And that's helpful to the baby because the baby wants to be born and you want the baby to come out of your body. So this is the question of the week. And the answer to that question is try a position, wait for at least 3, preferably 10 contractions, see how it is. Now, if something in you goes, that's not right, then feel free to move. But that movement might be as simple as instead of your knees out here in a squat, you get in an asymmetrical squat, or you bring your knees closer to the center that expands those muscles. It's not always changing one big position and replacing it with another big position. It is the subtlety, once we're skilled, to know that our baby is giving us messages and we should be helping our baby by getting into the best position for our baby. And then our contractions will become progressive. The contractions will, repeat after me, longer, stronger, and closer together. So what are you going to do once you listen to and watch this video? You're going to tell all your friends to become skilled, and you're going to become skilled. And your partner is going to learn birth coaching skills to help you cope, manage, work through, deal with, handle, stay on top of, and feel in control as you work through birth. So talk to you again next week. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, write them down below. And please subscribe and please share this video with other people interested in childbirth. Bye.